I'll be with you in a second. I'm just trying to find the notes that I made on the name of the NPC. You know what? Does anyone else have the name of the NPC? Anyone? Yes? You? No? Okay, I'll find it. Just wait. It's here. You know, we're going to change the name of the NPC. That's what we're going to do. All right. Okay. So, oh wait. Got it. No. I don't have it. Do your notes look like this? Random rubbish everywhere. Yeah. They probably do. How can we take better notes? Well, maybe this is how. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. We're talking about that thing that really sticks for all of us, and that's note-taking. Now, I've done videos before on note-taking, and, you try and put those things into practice, and as you see my book there, I've tried to do that, and, we've got partners like World Anvil, which allow you to create your whole world and organize everything along with it, but there is a big problem, I find anyway, a big disconnect. And that is whether I am sitting frantically trying to type stuff out on computer, which quite frankly, I don't find works very well. Not for me anyway, because I've got the other screens open and it's all that kind of stuff. Or you're trying to keep notes on your paper. You then have 20 pages of gobbledygook that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You've got to page through it and look for notes and things. Now, there is an advantage to that, by the way, which I think digital doesn't have. So bear this in mind. There is an advantage to that. Whilst paging through all of these cryptic notes and things, you come across something, you go, oh, I forgot all about that. Okay. Well, yes. And then you get other pages that are just filled with junk as you worked out hit points or whatever. So we're going to be looking at some solutions here in terms of how to organize our lives better. And the reason for it is that a company got hold of us the other day and said that they're producing this new product. Now, it's not new on the market. It has been around for quite some time. But what it does is it merges note-taking plus the digital environment, and it brings it all together into one easily manageable space, which I think is going to really help us moving forward. It's not going to help us, though, if we don't know what kind of notes we should be taking. So we're going to talk about that particular product at the end of the video. They were the sponsors for this week's show as well, full disclosure. But I think you will agree that they are on to something rather interesting. So if note-taking is a thing for you, it could be something to look out for. Okay, let's just jump straight into it now. So when we're talking about notes, what kind of notes should we be taking? Well, firstly, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to get truly organized, and my book that I keep looking at because it's glaring at me is not organized, but if you want to get organized, you need to break your note-taking down into sections, manageable sections that you can keep track of. So when you are taking notes, you don't just write down an NPC's name and then just move on. You need to write down certain pieces of information to help you remember just who the hell or what that name actually refers to. So let's start with NPCs. So with NPCs, what do we need to know? What are the bare basics that we need to know in terms of our NPCs? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the NPC needs to have a name. And if you're like me, that NPC also needs to have a quirk or a speech pattern. Or, and this is something that I've been using recently, which I found particularly useful as a kind of shorthand to get back into the character, is not only do I go their name plus their accent, but I also then go their attitude. And in a long-running game that I have been playing now, I have some perma NPCs that are following the group around, but they're not around every session. They might come in every third or fourth session. And all I did was next to them, I wrote their name, I wrote their accent, and then I wrote their attitude. And that attitude could be inquisitive, it could be excited, it could be dour, it could be skeptical, it could be aggressive. So that I know that when I'm then doing that NPC, if it says aggressive next to it, it might be in some kind of accent. I mean, the accent doesn't have to come from this planet, by the way. We don't have to use accents from this planet. So when people say, oh, is that a sort of a Chinese Australian? And I go, yes, but it was neither Chinese nor Australian. That's what my elves sound like. Bear that in mind, by the way. Anyway, so an aggressive character might be, yeah, what do you want? I haven't got any time for this. Come on, what is it? I'm busy. Don't bother me with your trifles. That's an aggressive. Whereas a passive might be, did I do something wrong? I hope I didn't. If I did, I really take it back. I don't want to offend you. How can we make this better? What can I do to help you? So by just jotting that down, it helps sum up, I think anyway, a whole bunch of techniques that will help you just to re-impersonate that NPC. But what you don't want to do, and this is the important thing in my opinion, is that you don't want to muddle up the NPC's sort of attitudes and that sort of thing with additional information. If the NPC is on a quest, or the NPC has given the quest for the player, that should be a note which says quest, and then give it a basic name, or give it a reference, so the red gem or the gemstone statue of a bird, just something like that. And that leads us into our next then entry, which is your hooks. So you're going to be throwing out lots of plot hooks, but you shouldn't muddle those plot hooks in and amongst your NPC information, because otherwise you're going to be going back to NPCs going, oh, I wish I remember what this plot hook was. No. So you should have another category called plot hooks. And in plot hooks, that's then when you would write the name of the NPC, Bigglesworth, the red statue. But what do we need to talk about in terms of plots? Well, ultimately, I think we need to talk about the big information. And then, so let's say the red statue will hunt dragons when activated correctly, missing 3 components. During the session, you don't have to know what those components are, by the way. You can make that up after the players have started to investigate and check and do all this kind of stuff. But you don't need to write down that information just yet if you don't have it. If you do, well, you can jot it down, but that's going to be a lot of writing that you're doing in-game. So that's something else that I'm really advocating, is that this should all be done during the session. Whilst you are running the session, you're just making notes very quickly. There is nothing wrong with running the game and letting the players talk amongst themselves whilst you're just making a few notes. Or if the players say, okay, well, we move on, you go, just give me a second here, jot, 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 jot. Okay, let's go. And you've written down a few key words. Now, something else you want to write down when you're talking about plot hooks is the name of the NPC, obviously, so you can refer back to which NPC that was, what the quest is about, and where the plot hook leads. Old lady in southern town might know. And then you just underline the old lady in southern town might know. She isn't yet an NPC because you haven't created her as an entry, and the players haven't encountered her yet, so you don't know what she's going to be. But you now know that when it's underlined, that there is a potential option there. And of course, the town name would be rarely useful. So you want to have a location of your plot hook. You want to have a basic what is the plot hook, and you want to have where does it lead. Those are the 3 things really that you want to have. The NPC who gave it might be useful, but that's not necessarily important unless they're going to go back to the NPC. All right, so we've so far got NPCs, and then we have plot hooks. The next entry that you're going to have, or should have, by my opinion, is the lore entry. What lore are you adding to your world as you're going on? I am a great explorer of my own worlds. And by great explorer, I mean that's what I love to do because I don't make it up beforehand. Now, if you've been watching my special 4-part series on campaign creation, you'll see that there's been very little actual campaign creation, and it's more just been about getting the rule systems in place so that we can start exploring this world together. Now, this Wednesday, as of this episode's launch date, is the final one. We're talking about the monsters that we're going to add into this world. That's as far as we're going to go, and then we're just going to explore and see where we're going. So I explore my world and develop my lore as I go. Now, this is contrary to what a lot of world builders will tell you, and that you should have all of this in place beforehand to avoid inconsistencies. I say inconsistencies are what makes the world feel real, as opposed to being inconsistencies. So the notion that you have an entry in your book somewhere, a tabbed page, or just a page labeled lore, or a different color page, or however you want to create your page layouts and things is entirely up to you, but you would add in lore that you've added in. Flowering trees with purple flowers called the Dojeros tree, underline. So again, what is the lore? What's important about the lore is a date, if you've thrown out a date, an important name, and then the actual little snippet of lore. Now, of course, if your players bump into a librarian and he says, "Oh, the Degeros tree, oh, yes," it's hunted by the Tukari people, as well as the Madaran, the Chubai, the QQ, and then, of course, it is predated upon by, and you list 15 monsters. You don't need to write that down. You really don't need to write that down. The PCs are not going to write that down. And this is where we start to then need to remember that the players are exploring this world as well. They might write down the Dajara tree, and that's about it. They won't go much further than that. They might write down the first name of the tribe, but if you're giving them miles and miles and miles of information, they're not going to write that down. So they will take down some salient points, and that's what you should be doing as well. If you come back to the Dajara tree later on, then you can fill in that information, absolutely, and expand upon it and add to your notes. But don't overtax yourself in terms of, okay, guys, you come across the Dajara tree. Give me 20 minutes whilst I write 15 pages of lore. You don't need to do that in terms of helping make your world feel real. 5 senses, if you really must. What are the color of the leaves, the flowers? Does it have flowers? Does it have branches? Is it a straight up and down tree? You know, does it smell? Does it not smell? What does it feel like? Just work through the 5 senses if you absolutely have to. My suggestion would be to give them 2 senses. It's a tall tree that towers over you, bathing you in cool shade, and smells vaguely of jasmine on a summer's breeze. That's all you need. They will remember that tree for quite some time. The faint smell of jasmine wafts past your nose as the sun sets. Oh, the Dajara tree must be around. Yeah, absolutely. There we go. Good. Right. So, lore in the bag. Few details. The minimalist amount of details as possible to make that lore entry make sense for you. And again, this is something that's absolutely important. You have to do that. It has to make sense for you. I remember writing egg because this egg was going to do something. And I didn't have time to describe it, and then I couldn't remember what was in my head for that plan. That's something that's very important. Complete segue from what else we're going to have in our book. But what's very important is to, when you write down something, and you write down egg, if the players just find an egg, and they don't explore it any further, they don't pursue it, they don't look into it, it's egg, right? They put it in their backpack, and 6 months later they go, oh, pull out that egg. And you go, oh, crikey, what did that egg do? Well, that egg is now going to fall into lore, or it's going to fall into the next category, which we're talking about, which is magic items and their abilities. If your game has magic items and its abilities, or if it has technology that has got some cool kind of effect, you want to make a note of this. You really do want to make a note of it. You want to drop that down and say, okay, well, egg gives the consumer the ability to turn into a dragon once every month and fly. Whatever. I mean, you design your magical item. If you're doing it on the fly, make sure that you keep it cryptic and ancient artifact, which defies certain magical identification spells so that you can evolve it over time. But you want to have an entry for magical items or technology that you can drop in and just keep track. So if you talk about the flying ships of the city of Alkura, flying ships in Alkura, charge 15 gold pieces per trip, takes 1 hour to travel from point A to point B. Basic information. And just add that in. Because once we finish doing all of these entries, we're not yet finished. There's a few little things left, but they're not big. Once we've done with all of these entries, you then have a fairly good working catalog of material. So when you are entering your entries, it is important that you do flip to the right space. Do not get lazy and put it all on one page. That's how we ended up in this disastrous place in the first place. Okay, so then all that we need to finally add in terms of our books are player character notes. What notes are we making on the player characters? This is something that I think a lot of GMs fail to do, is whilst the players are doing something, if the player insults an NPC, does that entry go into the NPC section or does it go into the player section? Well, it kind of could sit in either or. If the NPC insults the player and calls the player a coward, well, that then might go in the NPC information where they are perhaps loud-mouthed or aggressive or angry. On the other hand, if the PC kills the NPC's husband or wife or sister or whatever, that would go into the PC's history. Okay, because once you've got these little notes in PC history, before you start your next session, go to the PC histories and have a look. And let me rephrase, not next session, next adventure. Because your session is running and it's going and it's all good. You don't want to muck around with that. But before you start your next adventure, you go to what the PCs have done and you go, oh, there was that one illithid that they cut the tentacle off of and then let him go. I could do an adventure where he comes back. So it's not a plot hook. A plot hook is what you have done, what you have created, what you have thrown out there. The PC information is what the PCs have done and what the PCs intend to do. Just little notes that you can just jot down and add in so that you then have the ability to come back and make this amazing adventure happen. And the PCs go, wow, we did that like months ago. And now they've come back for revenge. Or, you know, we stole this a while ago and now they've come back for revenge, or they've sent bounty hunters after us. It's an amazing library or deposit of information that you can go through. So by having all of these different categories, you suddenly start to have a much better way of controlling your note taking. It might sound tedious, but if you get a book, just something like this, and you page up, you text all the text, you can either, you know, put in little page dividers or whatever you like. I mean, stationery is not something that I particularly am interested in. As you can see, my note taking is not fantastic. I have lots of blank pages, and then I have lots of pages covered with arrows and diagrams and just rubbish. And like here, springtime, I think that's the time period in which the players are operating. That would either sit under law or it could go under the plot hook, for example. Springtime, why would it go under a plot hook? Spring Festival. Thank you very much. That sounds like a lot of fun to have. It could go into law where we add in the Spring Festival. We can choose where we drop stuff depending on how we want to use it as well. That's the other important thing. Okay, so that's my advice in terms of how to improve your note taking. I think that this is, from what I have tried and what I have practiced, possibly the best way to do it. Now, if you think that this is going to help you in terms of your note taking, hit that like button or the subscribe button. It makes the marketing goblin so happy. And the little dance that she does when she gets another subscriber is just to die for. It really is. I'm going to put that into my lore section, that the goblins do a little dance whenever there is a subscriber or a like. Now, I would love to know what your thoughts are in terms of note keeping. Now, like I said, we've done videos on this before, but it's never harmful to see what other people do. I know a lot of people, they have their laptop next to them and they type it out. I can't do that. It's too disruptive for me. I think it's just too shiny. I need to go back to basics, and the note-taking works for me. So leave us your thoughts down below. The sponsor for today is Rocketbook, and there's a reason why I wanted to bring up Rocketbook in this particular video on note-taking, because they're going to allow us to do exactly what I've just been talking about, but instead of going through books and books and books and books, you can now bring it all together where it's a book, but it's also digital. But it's also a book, but it's also digital. And it will never be messy again. Check this out. So Rocketbook has sent me a few of their Rocketbooks. They come in different colors, a red color, black color, which is quite nice. And what I like about Rocketbook is that you can take the book and you just write in it. You make regular notes, as you normally would, as you can see, my awful handwriting. But, and this is where they change. So, for example, you get different color pens, and they use a specific type of pen, the friction pen, which you can get from any online. And they come in different colors. So what you can do is you can make a drawing. So let's make a note here of our NPC. Our NPC here is Brian, okay? And let's say that we have Brian, and then we're going to go to our next page, which we have decided to call our lore. So we go to the next page. This is lore. So let me just write here on lore. Lore, I'm going to underline it and draw some notes around it. And during the game, I might, because I'm an idiot, I'm going to write down the hit points, of a monster that I'm keeping track of, and then I'm going to cross those out. So it's awful. It's unneat. And then I go, oh yeah, okay, cool, great session, everybody. So I've got 3 or 4 pages of notes that I now do what with? Well, under normal circumstances, I would just leave them in this ugly format. But due to the way that Rocketbook works, let's go back to some notes that I made before, where this was some role-playing notes of something. It's a bit messy. I take a little bottle of water. I'm using a spritzer because of the demonstration. I spritz. I take a cloth. And oh my goodness, it wipes away and leaves it completely blank. Now this, by the way, this piece here that I'm erasing has been on here for about 2.5 weeks or so, give or take. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be holding the book up whilst wiping stuff down. You would keep the book flat to make life easier for yourself. But now, all of a sudden, you've got your page back, or, and this is the part that I particularly like, let's go back to this page where we've got, imagine here, lots of text, but this nonsense of the hit points. Well, I just spritz it and erase it, and off we go. I now have writing space. However, these books are particularly thin and light, and I'm going to be, once all of the COVID is done, traveling around, going to different venues, so a light little notebook is great. But it's going to fill up really quickly. Yes? No. Because at the bottom of every page within this particular book, there is a QR code. And more importantly, and you cannot see them here, so I'm going to bring up some slides for you, there are little icons at the bottom. What do these mean, I hear you ask? Well, that's what I asked a couple times over, and in the front of the book you can actually list what they actually mean. There you can see the actual icons. They're in green. They normally sit at the bottom of the page. You write your page, and now you know how to write it properly. You then take your good old-fashioned cellular telephone, and you take a photograph of that using the Rocketbook app, which is free, and it automatically uploads it to a drive of your choice. Now, because of those little icons, if you set each icon to plot hook, NPC, lore, PC notes, etc., it will automatically send the file to that particular folder. So if you created all of those folders on your drive, you could double-click on the NPC folder and see every NPC that you've ever created available to you to then transpose into a document. Now, if that isn't the ultimate workflow in terms of preserving your notes, of saving the environment, of traveling light, and of being able to not have stacks and stacks of books with cryptic notes, I don't know what. So they are currently running a Kickstarter for a particular type of Rocketbook that they are now manufacturing. And in the near future, they're going to be manufacturing a role-playing specific book with different categories that I had the advantage of helping to advise them on what should be included. So you want to watch out for that. Now, this latest Kickstarter is a series of different pages. Some are squared, some are lined, some are, it doesn't matter. Go and check them out. This is a long promo because it's a technical promo, and I feel like it's of real benefit. By the way, this is what How to Be a Great GM uses. All the Web Goblin, the Marketing Goblin, and myself, we use these for keeping notes and things during meetings. Now, check out the Kickstarter. Go and back them. Link down below. So I think that these books, just one of them, I have 2 of them because, well, we got sent 2 of them to use. One of them I already owned. The other one was sent by the company for the promotional video thing, whatever. I have 2 of them. They are really, really handy. So their Kickstarter is currently running. You want to go and check that out and get in on the action on these really, really remarkable books that I think are going to really change how your note-taking actually occurs. So thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Thank you to our Patreons for making this entire YouTube channel possible. And thank you for you for watching all the way until the end. Until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of gaming.